Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into an ancient mystery, and it's one that starts with a cursed Greek king and ends up, well, right inside your own mind. We're talking about the ultimate intersection of classical literature, heavy-hitting philosophy, and modern psychology. It's a seriously fascinating journey, so let's just jump right in. So, let's start off with a pretty massive existential question. Are you writing your own life story, or are you just playing out a script that was handed to you by fate? Are we all just puppets of destiny? It's the kind of question that has kept philosophers tossing and turning for literally thousands of years. Think about it. Did you actually choose what you had for breakfast this morning? Or was that decision basically locked in by the universe billions of years ago? To get to the bottom of this, we've got to look at the ultimate doomed character of Western literature, Oedipus. You probably know the basics, right? He's the guy who got a prophecy saying he'd kill his father and marry his mother. He runs away to avoid it and then ends up doing exactly that. But as this totally brilliant paper by classical scholar E.R. Dodds points out, pretty much everything we think we know about Oedipus is entirely wrong. Dodds was actually so frustrated by his students completely misunderstanding the play that he wrote this piece just to set the record straight. In it, Dodds absolutely dismantled what he called the three heresies of Oedipus Rex. The first is this moralizing idea that Oedipus was a bad guy and just got what he deserved. The second is this really popular belief that it's a tragedy of destiny, where man has zero free will and is literally just a puppet dancing on the strings of the gods. And the third is the cynical take that the gods are just convenient plot devices. Well, today we are going to completely debunk that second heresy, the whole idea that Oedipus was just a helpless puppet. What's really fascinating here is how Dodds tackles that first heresy, the idea that Oedipus had some fatal moral flaw that caused his ruin. See, for a long time, especially among Victorian critics, people really wanted to believe the universe was fair and just. They desperately wanted to find a reason why Oedipus somehow deserved his awful fate. So they looked back to Aristotle's Poetics for an answer. Aristotle used this Greek word hamartia to describe a tragic hero's downfall. Now, those Victorian critics completely misunderstood this. They thought it meant a moral failing or a sin. But actually, in Aristotle's quasi-legal terminology, it really just meant a tragic mistake, one made without knowing the full truth. I mean, Oedipus didn't marry his mother because he was a bad person. He did it because he literally had no idea who she was. It was a mistake committed in total ignorance of the material facts. So the crucial takeaway here is that seeing Oedipus as a victim of some strict tragedy of destiny is totally anachronistic. The 5th century Greeks simply did not think in the rigid terms of determinism versus free will like we do today. As Dodds points out, that whole debate about determinism, that's a creation of later Hellenistic thought. To Sophocles and his original audience, just because the gods knew what was going to happen didn't mean they were forcing it to happen. Divine foreknowledge simply didn't equal human predetermination. And this brilliantly highlights the real truth of the text. Yes, the oracle's prophecy to Oedipus was unconditional. But his actions on stage, those were entirely his own. I mean, no oracle told Oedipus he had to relentlessly interrogate the herdsman. No god forced him to tear away that final veil of illusion. His search for the truth, driven by his own courage and his loyalty to his city, was an act of absolute free choice. And that devastating decision to blind himself at the very end, that was also a completely voluntary, self-chosen act to cut himself off from humanity. All right, that brings us to section 1, the philosophical face-off, destiny versus choice. You see, this exact tension we find in the Oedipus myth, this epic clash between a preordained path and the human capacity to choose, it laid the groundwork for a massive philosophical battle that has raged for centuries since. As human civilization shifted from the age of gods and heroes into the age of reason, we really had to figure out who was in the driver's seat. In one corner, you've got strict determinists like Spinoza. He argued that free will is basically just a hallucination. Spinoza believed the universe runs on strict necessity, and we only think we have free will because we're ignorant of all the complex causes forcing our hands. But bouncing right up against him, we have Descartes, who championed the mind's absolute, undeniable autonomy. Descartes completely separated the mind from the physical world, arguing that the very act of thinking, his famous "I think, therefore I am," proves that we absolutely have independent, free agency. Moving right along to section 2, the modern oracle. Generating our own fate. Because today, the oracle handing down prophecies isn't sitting on a mountain in Delphi, it's actually right inside your own head. We've internalized those forces of destiny. And this brings us to a foundational sociological concept. Back in 1928, William Isaac Thomas wrote, "If men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences." This is basically the birth of what we now call the self-fulfilling prophecy. It's this wild phenomenon where our initial expectations about a situation actually alter our behavior, completely forcing reality to conform to our fears. You literally become the author of your own tragic destiny. Think about it. Let's say you constantly tell yourself, I'm going to fail this exam, or I am just completely awkward in social situations. Because you expect failure, you stop studying, or maybe you just refuse to talk to anyone at a party. Well, your lack of effort guarantees that you fail, which then just reinforces your original negative thought. Psychologist Martin Seligman refers to this toxic loop as learned helplessness. It's a state where you believe your actions just don't matter, and it's a major precursor to depression. You've essentially prophesied your own doom and then acted it out, every bit as inevitably as Oedipus did.
Which brings us to Section 3, breaking the strings and reclaiming your agency.
So how exactly do we break the strings of our own self-made fate? I mean, if our minds are constantly predicting disaster and forcing us to act it out, how do we get our free will back? Fortunately, modern psychological tools like mindfulness and acceptance and commitment therapy, also known as ACT, they offer a really practical way to sever these mental strings. See, traditional therapy sometimes try to force you to just think positive thoughts. But fighting your own mind, that takes a massive amount of psychic energy, and honestly, it often just tangles you up even further in the strings. ACT takes a completely different and arguably much cooler approach. The big goal here is something called cognitive diffusion. Step 1 is learning to just coexist with the negative thought without trying to erase it or wrestle it to the ground. You just let it be there. Step 2 is using diffusing language. So instead of saying, I will fail, which feels like an absolute truth, you step back and observe the thought. You say, I notice I am telling myself I will fail. And wow, that tiny shift in language creates immediate psychological distance. It changes the thought from this undeniable doom-saying oracle into just a passing sentence in your brain. And in that little bit of space, your power to choose your next action is immediately restored. So I want to leave you with this final thought to reflect on today. We aren't actually cursed by the gods, but we are very often cursed by our own minds. Are you writing a tragedy for yourself at work, or maybe in your relationships, by acting out a script of self-doubt and fear? And more importantly, now that you know you are the one holding the pen, what choice will you make today to rewrite it? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you reclaim a little bit of your own.
Knowledge grows through sharing. What are your thoughts on today's topic? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe as we continue to grow together.